morning, everyone. Welcome to THR Talks, presented by The Hollywood Reporter and YouTube. We have a great lineup of panelists for you this morning for the Financing Through the Power of Fans talk that we will have. I'll start with Burnie Burns here on my right from Rooster Teeth. And
hello.
Right next to him, the filmmakers of Finders Keepers, which is in documentary competition up at the festival. We have Bryan Carberry and Clay Tweel. And next to Clay is Marc Hofstaffer from Indiegogo. He is head of film and digital at the Crowdfunding platform. And finally, we have the inimitable John Sloss at the very end, who is a big indie film veteran and has been at the festival for many years and runs a company called Cinetic, and as well as Film Buff.
I don't think I've ever been in this room where I wasn't dancing like a maniac.
That can still happen.
Yeah.
Watch this space.
Keep the streak alive.
It's concert only. We're changing that today. I wanted to start with you, Burnie, because you are the odd man out when it comes to the Sundance Film Festival. You're not here to promote a film necessarily that's in the festival. You've flown in specifically for this amazing panel. You, with Rooster Teeth, you've created something that I think a lot of indie filmmakers aspire to create at this point, to build your own audience and to find that audience in a very organic and authentic way. So I wanted to just pick your brain about Rooster Teeth, you guys have something like over 3 billion views on your YouTube channel.
Right.
You guys have recently crowdsourced a feature film. Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit about the genesis of your YouTube channel and how, I'll ask you more about the crowdfunding later, but how you started to build your audience. That I think is a very valuable thing that people want to learn about.
Well, I think it's really relevant to Sundance because our history as a company began in a much more traditional sense, where we were in the late 90s. My business partner and I, Matt Hullum, we were independent filmmakers. I was a computer science student at the University of Texas, and he was a film student. It was right after Robert Rodriguez had made El Mariachi and set the world on fire with a $7,000 movie. And I always had an interest in filmmaking, and so I thought, I could sit in a film class or I could make a movie, and that should teach me everything I need to know about making movies. And so I found a film student who was willing to work with a software engineer student to make a film. It took us a year to make it, and then we thought we were done. That was the hard part, making the movie. Then we found out, though, that there's a whole other process beyond that, which is, at that point in time, getting something that you've made in front of people that want to watch it. And so the way we had to do that was by going to film festivals and applying to film festivals. Applied to Sundance, South by Southwest, went through a whole year-long process of essentially trying to convince a selection committee of about 5 to 9 people to allow us to show our movie to a room full of about 200 people. And that's the way the process worked. But about that same time, we also had that itch to keep making more content. And so we started making fun little videos. This is about year 2000 now. And posted a video online that was a parody of the old Apple Switch ads. And Matt was working in LA and I was in Austin. And he called me the day after I put it up and he said, "I saw your thing. Somebody in my office was watching it." And I said, "I put that up yesterday at about 6 o'clock after work." And he saw it the next day. Somebody that I would have called to say, "Watch this video," it got to him organically before I even had the chance to pick up the phone and tell him to watch it. So for us, that was a moment that just like all those barriers fell down. We realized at that point in time, we can go directly to an audience. So in 2002, we made the trailer for our first series, Red vs. Blue, put it online April 1st of 2003, and it was really off to the races from there. We had about 3,000 viewers on the first episode. We had about 250,000 on the second episode, and by the fourth episode, we had 1 million viewers a week that were watching the show. And this is 3 years before YouTube, before anybody could, put ads even on videos or anything like that. We were posting this stuff ourselves and giving it directly to our audience. And just grew it from there.
Amazing. And then you have kind of come full circle and had a film that you wanted to finance called Laser Team.
Right?
So I believe you're in post on it right now.
Right. We had a crowdfunding campaign last year where we always wanted to get back to making feature films, and now the technology that exists. Back when we first started, we were shooting on 16 millimeter film, and that took forever. We couldn't even see what we had shot until a month later, until we could afford to have the film developed. And so we always wanted to get back to making feature films, and Laser Team in particular was always going to be our next project, where we were going to work on this, and then we were going to work on Laser Team. And after about 2 years of that, we realized, all right, we're kind of putting this thing off because we're trying to build up the resources in order to make it. So we thought, why not go out to Indiegogo, crowdfund this, rely on our audience, which now was up to 18 million subscribers on YouTube, and we had reached 3 billion views. We thought, why don't we do this? And so we ran a campaign last year, 30 days, and we raised about $2.5 million, and broke the record for the most funded campaign in the history of Indiegogo. So it was a great summer.
I'll say, and the film's already shot. That's incredible.
Right. We turned around and shot it quickly. That's actually really funny because the meetings that we have in LA are funny because we had just finished the crowdfunding campaign. We were going around talking to people about some pre-talks about distribution, and they said, "Well, when do you guys think you're going to be shooting this?" And we were like, "We're going to shoot it in October." And they said, "Okay, so October of 2015." It's like, "No, we're shooting next month." And people couldn't believe that that's how fast we could get something up and running. But that's just the way we're used to working on the web.
Yeah, amazing. I'm so intrigued by Finders Keepers. I have not seen the film yet, but I read a little bit about the premise, and it involves a leg, part of a leg, a mummified leg found in what was it, a car grill?
A meat smoker.
A meat smoker. So tell me a little bit about your journey in putting together this film. I know it was crowdfunded. Tell us about sort of how you got to the point where you're like, let's take this to Kickstarter and try to get it funded.
Well, so Ed Cunningham found the story back in 2008, and it was seeing
And Ed is
Ed.
the producer you worked with.
Yeah, Ed Cunningham's the producer on the project, and we worked with him on The King of Kong back in 2007. And, he wanted to, go and shoot some things and meet these characters. But then, we got a little bit of footage, and it wasn't until, 2012, 13?
13.
That we kind of said, we need to go back and do more filming. And Bryan here really spearheaded the movement to try to get the project finished in a way.
You guys came across just this information in the research that Ed had done, or that sort of organically arose?
He had heard about the story, went there, and on a little camcorder shot some footage, and we probably got 30 hours of footage out of that, and then we're able to keep tracking the story as things in their lives progressed. But it wasn't really until Kickstarter that we had a focus like, well, this is our plan to finish the movie. Now we have to figure out how to have real capital to, go and rent cameras and put it together.
So how did you go about selling this idea to the Kickstarter funders? What was, what was your pitch line for this movie?
Well, we've found our log line is pretty, the hook's pretty good of the movie. Two guys battling over the custody of a leg. And so just being able to kind of put a few images to that, and there's some great archive news media that existed when all this was going down back in 2007 and 2008. So utilizing those things and just the promise of that crazy story was able to sell it a little bit.
Now, what sort of incentives did you have to put up on your campaign to get people to cough up some money?
A lot of the basics, like the DVD, the digital downloads, some T-shirts. One of the guys in the movie makes T-shirts to capitalize on finding a leg in a meat smoker. So that T-shirt we made available. Some posters from like Ed Cunningham's previous movies, Undefeated, King of Kong. Hot
And Seth, yeah.
Yeah, and Seth Gordon, and then Hot Sauce from Billy Mitchell from King of Kong. Yeah.
Determining what the rewards are in a campaign can be as important as anything else, because you want to end up with the most amount of funds left to be able to make the project that people decided to fund. And so you have to be careful about that. I know somebody who ran a campaign, and he didn't cap one category that became very popular, and he ended up having to make something like 2,500 vines for contributors. And it was about 4 months of his life just doing vines. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
At least it was only 6 seconds at a time.
Yeah, exactly. It's like making 40 movies.
that is. I feel like the hardest thing is finding that line of, because you don't want to spend months of your life packing and shipping things that you have to create, because that just chews time and money too. So being inventive and creative about what your incentives are that won't break your budget and chew a lot out of what you're raising.
Right. And you have no idea till you put it up, like what's going to work or what's not. So we tried to be, aggressive on making the rewards worthwhile, but at the same time you had to like keep in mind like how much of a time commitment am I going to have away from the production in order to fulfill all this.
Marc, from your point of view, being at Indiegogo, what are some of the harder lessons that filmmakers have learned in mounting campaigns on Indiegogo?
Well, I think honestly, it's a truth with all crowdfunding campaigns, wherever they are. But more than anything, it's not being prepared. It's not doing the research and doing the math of like what are you going to have to fulfill, but also about I remember there was this one documentary. It was a skater documentary by a great filmmaker, actually a Sundance alum, and at first he was only targeting the skating community, and skaters don't have money. Or if they did, they are like, screw corporate America, and they don't want to participate.
Right.
So the filmmaker had to pivot and realize that, okay, who else does this film appeal to? And actually, I think that's really great in terms of testing your audience before the film even comes out, or maybe even before you even finish the film, to know like, okay, let's say I'm making a film about electronica, EDM. And actually, there's a documentary that's coming up. And the filmmaker, it's a story about a famous DJ, and the DJ passed away. There was some addiction issues. There was some mental health issues. And so when you're really looking at the campaign, you got to figure out like, what communities can I reach out to? Who will respond to this? Not only the campaign but the project itself in the biggest way possible. If you just target the one audience, then what if they don't show up? Then you're screwed. So it's really just taking the time to prep, do your homework, and look at other campaigns and see what's worked. Sometimes people just don't do that, and they think if they just put it up, if you build it, they will come, and it's not always the case.
John, you with the documentary Life Itself about Roger Ebert, you guys did a crowdsourcing effort on that. Tell us a little bit about that and some of the innovations you guys
Okay, thanks.
had.
I think I'm up here because I'm a gigantic proponent of crowdfunding as a sort of sleeping giant of content finance. Your name's Burnie?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a perfect companion piece to a YouTube channel that has that many devoted followers. The notion, and I was concerned that I'll get to that in a second, but I was concerned that crowdfunding was sort of getting off in the wrong direction as a sort of province of rich celebrities asking you to fund their pet projects. And I started thinking about it, and I said, it seems to me that crowdfunding more than anything is about community building. It's first about community building or rewarding the community you've built, going to those people and bringing them in at the inception of a project, and growing it together, deputizing them to really have an emotional connection to it, so that they'll be the core of the word of mouth engine. That's what it appeared to me. And Steve James was doing his Roger Ebert doc, which sadly is not nominated for an Academy Award. Had to say that. I've worked with him since Hoop Dreams, so we talk all the time. and we were both friends with Roger Ebert, who was a very forward-thinking person. And when he said to me, I want to do some crowdfunding, I said, can we try something that I don't believe has been done before? And that is, rather than just saying, hey, please help us, what we did was we focused on pre-selling the film and pre-selling a stream of the film before anyone can see it, before it's theatrically released, before it's available on VOD. Basically, the only people who can see it first were the people who contributed to the crowdfunding campaign. And there
And
was
at what level?
$25.
Wow.
And what it's funny, and there were some practical concerns. Like one was, well, would that violate the qualification run for the Academy, since people are going to see it before it's released theatrically? And we went to the Academy and said, under your rules, we think this is a private stream. Will you exempt us from the qualification? And they did. So that was one thing we got out of the way. And the other thing was that people were, well, if you're taking the core fans and you're pre-selling to them, you're cannibalizing the market for the film when it's released. I actually never believed that. I think really good films don't cannibalize audiences, especially by screening to the core first. I think they start to build a word-of-mouth base. And so we raised the money we raised. We came to Sundance last year. We made the stream. We decided to make the stream available to the people who had contributed at the exact moment we screened at Sundance. And I think 65% of the contributors watched it during the first screening. And then we had arranged for a closed circuit transmission to the contributors of the Q&A in Sundance. So they were the only ones who could see it. And I mean, that's just one example, but it just seems to me like crowdfunding as a finance, as a way to sort of market directly to your constituency and make them your partner is an awesome tool.
Burnie, you guys raised such an amazing amount of money, and I believe it also changed the scope of your film at that point, once you went over your goal by a multiple.
It did. Our initial goal that we were going to set was going to be $1 million, and Indiegogo actually advised us. We'd done a ton of research from other successful campaigns of not only how they ran the campaign, but also their reward structure and everything else. And we wanted to put $1 million goal down because we didn't want people to think that we didn't understand what it took to make a feature film, especially a sci-fi comedy. And it was actually Indiegogo that said, well, if you set your goal at $600,000, we understood the marketing aspects of a crowdfunding campaign, because that's really, for a lot of smaller projects, it's the first marketing that you get, is that. And so breaking the goal at $600,000 is one event, press event, and then hitting $1 million goal is another one.
And you hit $1 million, I think, in like 36 hours, right?
Yeah, 40 hours, just about. So we broke the...
6 sounds better than 40.
Yeah, yeah. It was, but it was really, really quick that we broke it, and so, and then we were just off the races from there with the rest of the campaign. But one of the things we really tried to focus on is that when we looked at other campaigns, we noticed that when a campaign launches, it has a lot of interest, and then when a campaign closes, especially if they're not yet at their goal, there's a lot of interest, a big spike of interest there at the end as well. But it kind of a U shape in the middle, and they all typically run about 30 days. That just seems to be the standard amount of time. So we wanted to kind of not flatten that out, but make a spike in the middle and kind of even out that interest of traffic. So we actually did one day directly in the middle of the campaign, we did essentially a 12-hour telethon for our audience, where we went in front of them. We used all of our different shows from the entire Rooster catalog, came out, and that was actually our third highest day. We raised a significant amount of money on just that one day, but it kept the interest for the campaign going.
And you avoided the dip, the U dip.
A little bit, we definitely mitigated it a little bit. But yeah, the scope of the project, we knew we were always going to make it, and we had the resources to make it. But another thing about crowdfunding campaigns is also communicating to the audience. John was talking about crowdfunding funding pet projects of celebrities. I mean, we watched in particular the Zach Braff crowdfunding campaign that the film sold at Sundance, and there was an enormous amount of backlash to that. And it's like, that's a normal thing that happens with movies once they're made. They get sold to distributors. But the audience was like, you had a negative reaction to that. So communicating very clearly from the get-go what we were planning to do, when this was going to be seen, how we hope to put it in front of audiences, and what that would mean for them as contributors, that was really, really important to us.
Now, are you guys going the traditional route and trying to find a traditional theatrical distributor, or will you?
The traditional route is kind of a moving target at this point in
That's
time.
true.
We even said when we started the campaign that we realized that a movie takes between 12 and 18 months to get made and get in front of audiences. That's what we were projecting. And that if we could project right then how people were going to be watching media 12 to 18 months from now, that would be a huge win on its own, just being able to predict that. So we said, like, if it was coming out today, we'd be pushing for it to be in theaters, you know? And so that's still the goal. We're looking at hopefully a theatrical release, but like John said, again, we don't believe that you can cannibalize audiences. We think that people watch content however they watch content, and that's the way they choose to see it. And they will just wait until it arrives on that platform. And we have experience with that. Our show, Red vs. Blue, is the longest running web series. It just went into its 13th season, and about a year and a half ago, it went up on Netflix for the first time. Because we thought, for whatever reason, Netflix streaming would cannibalize our audience, and we don't know. We had kind of held on to that notion for too long, and so we said, yeah, finally, let's put seasons 1 through 5 up on Netflix. And I had people telling me, writing to me on Twitter and social media saying, oh, great, Red vs. Blue is on Netflix. I can finally watch it. It's like, that show is available in every possible format. But it's like, those people they binge watch content on Netflix, and that's the way they consume it. And so you can't tell people how to consume your content or how to access your content. They're going to do it on their own, however they want to.
Incredible. Bryan and Clay, what are your plans for Finders Keepers now that it's at a festival?
Again, as Burnie was saying here, get it in front of as many eyeballs as possible. That's the win for us. And so we've been lucky enough for all of our past projects to get it in theaters, get our docs in theaters for a limited run, and then to be, in a variety of outlets, whether it's a Showtime or Picture House or Netflix. So whatever we can do to have a distribution channel that's we feel like is gonna put the most eyeballs on it. That's what we're looking for. Fingers crossed. Press screening today, 3 o'clock.
Yeah, it's screening soon. John, tell me a little bit about what your thoughts are on this sort of evolution of crowdfunding and where it's all going. You've seen the evolution of indie film and distribution, and obviously been behind the financing it for a long time. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that for crowdsourcing.
Well, I'm very interested in actually trying to figure that out. Crowdfunding at its best, I think, is a very simple. Maybe the simpler it is, the more effective it can be. The trick is accessing your communities, communicating to them, and bringing them in, as far as I'm concerned. And that, that's sort of the key to marketing expense, at studio pictures too. I mean, it's going to be a very important aspect of content going forward. And the notion of where people want to watch it is obviously critical. But that kind of data, just making everybody smarter about how to access audiences rather than just carpet bombing awareness like the studios do now, I think is going to be the future of sort of interesting content that isn't just lowest common denominator. I had mentioned to you before, we're in the process of sort of putting together a think tank of people in the industry who think about this stuff and trying to figure out how to sort of supercharge crowdfunding even beyond the arc that it's growing at right now. So I guess I would say watch this space.
Okay. And Burnie, I know that you had made some really great use of the analytics that you got off of your YouTube channel, and I believe you found out that no one in Asia was even remotely interested in what you guys were doing, and you were able to turn that around.
Well, historically we make a lot of comedy, and Rooster Teeth and Red vs. Blue got to be very popular globally, but we found that we were not really being discovered in non-English speaking countries because comedy tends to be cultural. And so when we make new content, we always try to break into new markets and find new audiences. We don't make content just to service our existing audience, although we hope they like it. And so like when we started producing new shows, for instance, we have an anime show called Ruby, and we specifically made that to get a little bit more traction in the Asian markets. And so instead of making it comedy, we made it more action-based because action is more universal. And it's paid off really well. We just signed a deal for Warner Brothers Japan to distribute our anime in Japan. It's the first anime to come from the U.S. over to Japan, so that's a strange milestone. They usually don't head that direction. But but I want to go back too to the numbers and the community aspect too. Is like whenever YouTube is always, I think it's plagued by these big numbers. Like you talk about 3 billion views and 18 million subscribers and things like that. But really, the crowdfunding campaign that broke the record, it was such a fraction of that. We had 35,000 people that funded the campaign at one level or another. And if you look at our 18 million subs on just YouTube, that is less than 0.25% of that audience that participated in the crowdfunding campaign. And at that level, with that small of an engaged audience, we were able to break the record. And that's huge. So it's like it can be hard when you hear about like YouTubers, especially throwing around like those big numbers like 18 million subs, but it doesn't take that. It doesn't take that in order to get something funded and get it out there. Yeah. Especially if like documentaries, I mean, your demographic tends to have higher earning power and everything else, so you can really do well with crowdfunding.
There's one particular project that funded on Indiegogo in 2014 called Hullabaloo. So it's a bunch of what were fired Disney animators who are now working for doing digital animation. They missed doing hand-drawn animation, 2D animation, and so they came to Indiegogo to essentially resurrect that. And they wanted to make one short, which they would release and hope for a qualifying run for the Oscars and everything like that. And so to make a hand-drawn short, it was going to cost them $80,000. And either they were going to raise that money or they weren't. They did an all-or-nothing campaign. They raised $460,000. They got picked up everywhere. The internet sort of exploded and said, "Please don't let this art form die." And it really just sort of speaks to again, the community, where if you do, I know I said this earlier, if you build it, they won't necessarily come. But if you have something that people actually are invested in emotionally or even nostalgically, they will be there for you. And there's another documentary on the site right now called The Connected Universe. It's in this last couple of days. It's out of Vancouver, and the director Malcolm, he had a very, very high goal for a documentary, which was $150,000. And I said, Malcolm, that's pretty high. I'm not sure, where do you think these people are going to come from to help you fund that much? It's like, trust me. Okay. And he's raised $224,000. And from over I think it's 3,000 people. It's the highest funded documentary on Indiegogo of all time. I think it's an amazing project, and it was actually kind of funny. Real quick anecdote. So it's called Connected Universe, about how we're all spiritually connected, and environment and all those sort of things. And I was in a hotel in San Francisco. I looked down at the desk, and there was a magazine. On the cover was the guy who stars in the documentary. So I guess we are all connected. So.
Just a thought. Burnie, you were saying, when you did your first film, you were looking to, gatekeepers, 9 people who worked at a festival
right.
in order to give you the right to show this film to other people. I mean, it's the same thing with financing. There's this orientation of filmmakers that they need to go to someone and get permission to make their films, that they need to go to a middleman who basically ordains that this film is worth financing. And in many cases, maybe you do, but if you've cultivated the communities like you do, the future, just like skipping a festival and going directly to your audience, is correspondingly about financing the same way. So I think if people really start thinking that way, it'll accelerate the whole process.
I'd love to open it up to some questions from the audience. I think we have a mic that we can bring out in the front here, or I can give my mic. Do we have a mic for the Q&A?
While you guys are getting that, I just want to back up what John just said too. Is that in my experience, it's been the point at which when you're making content, the point at which you run into the most aversion to risk is at the financing level. Like people are always talking about if you make this kind of content, who's going to watch it or anything like that. It's much harder conversation of if you want to make this kind of content, who's gonna pay for it, and who's gonna fund it, and like Marc was saying, with a documentary filmmaker who has faith in his audience, it's we know where our audience is. We know who our audience is based on our analytics that we've seen from our YouTube stats of just being able to look at that and our two-way conversation that we constantly have with our audience, and we've had now for 12 years. So we were able to make that leap of faith and say, yeah, we think that enough people are interested in this that we can get this thing funded and get it out there. And of course, once then that happened, then it made the other conversations a lot easier for finding additional financing and things like that.
For somebody who makes fairly small character documentaries, having conversations about ROI and return on investment, not my favorite place to be at.
Come on up.
Hey guys, so it's probably hard enough to get your first feature or documentary funded through crowdfunding, but you guys have given us a lot of great insights into how that's done. I'm curious, do you guys have any experience or data in terms of going back to the well? So if you got your first one funded by your fans or by the community that you've been developing, can you go back a second time, a third time, or is it sort of a one and done thing?
The answer is definitely yes. I'll give you an example. So Freddie Wong, also a YouTube creator, he has, I think it's 6 million subscribers, and he had run 2 very successful crowdfunding campaigns, and then he ran his third one with Indiegogo, which he raised, I believe about he raised $898,000, $100,000 more than his previous campaign, and I think from another 600 funders. So it all comes down to the messaging. And I always equate this to if Pearl Jam puts out an album, do you not buy, or are you not interested in the new one? It's as long as you're able to convey that message that you're doing something new and unique, or bringing back something that people already love, you can definitely do that.
Thank you.
Any more questions from the audience?
Hi, this question is for Burnie. What made you choose Indiegogo over another crowdsourcing platform?
There's a lot of different factors. At the time, we looked at the crowdfunding itself is almost like a platform that people just exist on. That it's a form of social media for them in an odd way. You can see like how many campaigns they've backed and everything. Indiegogo in particular, for us, just made the most amount of sense for the flexibility, the team there, and how we could work with them. That was great. Freddie Wong, Marc was just talking about, was basically like a consultant on our campaign. He'd run 3 campaigns for Video Game High School. So anytime I had an idea for this or that, I'd run it by Freddie, Matt Arnold over there, and they were very helpful in helping us get set up. They had great things to say about Indiegogo. And then there's little nuances to it. I think a really important one is that we have a younger audience, and just the way that Kickstarter in particular handles payments, that if somebody commits on day one that they want to pledge $100 to the campaign, that is not charged until the 30th day. Whereas Indiegogo, it's like I commit now and they're charged now. And just because as a younger audience, this is from a business level, is like we understood we probably would have a lot of commitments that went unfulfilled if they waited 30 days to do it. And that had its own challenges. When we added on rewards later, we weren't able to add on to an existing contribution. At that point in time, we had to find a way to do that all in the back end. But we found a great company called BackerKit that helped us do all that and sort through those 35,000 entries.
Thank you.
I'm curious, are you with your YouTube channel, are you utilizing their fan, I think they have like a new fan funding box that you can put on your channel?
No, we're not currently doing that. We also, because we started before YouTube, we were lucky enough to be able to start our own .com in an era where there wasn't a lot of competition with big platforms like Facebook and YouTube. I mean, back then it was MySpace and Friendster, and so we actually have our own website where we have 1.6 million registered users. So we focus our efforts there on that. We have a premium membership there where we give people access to content first. And we have a whole system in place and we make specific content just for those premium members as well.
It's like you're your own Amazon.
A lot of the rewards actually when we first started, looked like what crowdfunding looks like today. because we had different levels of sponsorship. Like if you would have a digital benefit, and then if you contributed $20 every 6 months, you would also get a DVD as well. And it's changed over the course of the 12 years. We used to give people content on Friday that was coming out on Monday, but now you can't with file sharing. You just can't do that. So our window went from 2 days, now it's 2 hours. But it's still, that's how fast the internet moves now. Is people consume content that quickly that 2 hour window is still a premium.
Wow.
Hi. So a lot of you guys have funded your projects with fans already. You already have that base. What advice would you give to someone who's trying to crowdsource a project but doesn't already have fans technically, besides like friends and family, like a young person who's trying to get their project out there and build a fan base, a community?
Well, you have to figure out what is your project about? Who are those people who's it going to appeal to outside of your friends and family? Typically, the funding process breaks down with the first third, roughly, or people that you know, whether it be friends, family, or it's just people generally within your network. But after that, that's when you really sort of, the campaign opens up to strangers. And so let's say you're doing a documentary. As I was talking earlier about the DJ documentary, EDM, fans of the DJ specifically, mental health community, the addiction community. So those 4 different communities. And so what you want to do is try and do your homework before the campaign launches. I would honestly take at least 4 weeks to scout out where those individuals live, where those blogs are, try and get some influencers on board, people who will tweet about your campaign, who are relevant to the topic. Even if it's just a dramatic narrative film, there's still something to that film. There's still a voice to be had. Or let's say, or even, you can look at, wherever you went to school, if they'll start tweeting about it. The more that you can bring them into those people, those influencers, your sort of host committee into the mix, then you won't have to just rely on your friends and family, because you'll have not just 5 people being your advocate, you'll have 5,000 people being your advocate.
And I might add, that kind of analysis is critical to all kinds of filmmaking. If you're going out to make a film and to ask someone to finance your film traditionally, the first thing they should ask you is, who is the core audience? Who is going to consume this film? So unless you're living in a bubble somewhere, this is an analysis I think you need to do when you're making content like that.
Thank you very much.
And as another
Sorry.
practical suggestion, starting from, with a smaller audience or no audience, the only thing I would suggest in addition to what Marc said would be look for a subreddit on Reddit, because Reddit's a huge platform that also has very segmented subreddits with very niche audiences that are interested in certain topics. And so you can find that topic and it might have 80,000 people that are interested in specifically what you're talking about.
Thank you very much.
How you doing? So it's kind of like a piggyback from what she just was asking about building the fan base. So I guess I have a question mainly for Burnie. Does that still apply to YouTube channels? Because I know if you have a specific campaign, you can search your audience and kind of find out who they are specifically and build your audience for that one project. But if you're trying to build a channel, do you just throw the content out there and find the audience that way, or do you research who the audience might be beforehand and then focus on them and try to build it that way?
Yeah, going back to what they said too, it's if you can find somebody who makes similar kind of content and then they like your content and will promote it, that's probably the fastest way. So if you can find some way to collaborate, like through a network or something like that, with some people who already have established audiences, that seems to be the best way in order for that to happen. But the biggest problem on YouTube, in particular right now, is discoverability.
You said discovering what?
Discoverability.
Oh.
I don't know if they even published the stat anymore, but the last time I read it is that every minute on YouTube, 100 hours of content are uploaded. That means if you wanted to watch every video on YouTube, you would fall about 4 days behind every minute you tried to do that. So it's a very big noise floor. And then we're seeing a shift now from the other direction, where look at all the content from HBOs and Hulus and CBSs that's now primarily for the web, honestly, because they're cutting all those cords and they're all moving to the digital environment. So it's a very noisy environment. The best way I'd say to cut through it is to find somebody who's already got an existing audience.
Okay, that's a good idea. Thanks.
And those people want to find new things to show to people. I mean, they're trying to entertain their audience as well. If they can point them in the direction of something new and cool, they like doing that.
All right. So as someone with an existing audience, I've done the Fan Funder. I've done, I'm trying to consider the Patreon and that kind of thing. But I do have some bigger projects that I want to go to Indiegogo or Kickstarter. So question for you guys. I know that every project is different, but what have you guys seen historically, some of the things that don't work? So like DVDs work well, but Blu-rays, waste of money, or like something like that.
I mean, honestly, it's very specific per campaign. But as Burnie was speaking to earlier, in terms of just commitments to, selling or rather offering perks that are experiences, like you have a very large fan base, so your fans, I've seen you at VidCon, how they love you, and they'd want to be part of, they want to be around you. So whether it's a set visit, whether it's a lunch with you, whether it's an Instagram video message addressed to someone directly, then
2,400 vines maybe.
Well, yeah, I would limit that. Yeah. But those things, obviously are value. DVDs and Blu-rays, some people are traditionalists, but you know your audience best. So whether or not they respond to that, you have to know yourself.
Great. All right, thanks.
Hi, I've got a question for the documentarians. So you've picked these ideas like Finders Keepers and Roger Ebert. And how did you decide to pick that while also, like, how do you balance picking a topic with also, finding an audience? Like, do you thrive on something like conflict, like sharing a leg, or like what is it that you like? How do you decide on a new project that will also, get you the money that you need to produce it?
Well, so for this, it was discovered in 2008 and had kind of stalled out for lack of, funding, basically. So, the project comes first, and then Kickstarter just so happened to come along and let us finish it. So I'd imagine, across the board, it's usually, try to find the audience in what's a good story.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times some of the hardest part for making a doc is finding a resolution. And so if you can see past that horizon to see that, like, these, for us making kind of character-based documentaries, that there's going to be an arc, there's going to be a change in these people, then hopefully there's going to be a compelling enough kind of universal story that's relatable, that can, as Marc was saying, kind of fulfill, whether it's, it's a story about a leg, but there's also an addiction aspect. And, you can kind of check as many boxes as you can for your audience. Then you can start to see, well, maybe the crowdfunding platform will allow us to kind of, achieve all these goals.
And I think if you really believe in the project and believe in the story too, then your enthusiasm will, I think the audience will pick up on your enthusiasm and your belief that it's something good, and that, can lead to success.
Yeah, and I'm going to partially contradict what I said before. It's really hard to engineer content, for an audience. You should be mindful of it, but you shouldn't be a slave to it. One thing I've found over the years is that the one genre that always seems to work is the new, something that people haven't seen before. And the one element that I think has been the most important in success has been passion. So if you're feeling it, you've got to be mindful about whether there's an audience and about storytelling, but not try to reverse engineer, say that was a doc that worked this way, so I'm going to do the same thing. I know that's...
Thank you.
Just want to say hello. And then also, have you ever had an instance where you started a crowdfunding project and then a corporate sponsor comes in and asks if they can fund you instead? And then when that happens, what would you do? And then who do you have responsibility to, your crowdfunded fans or the corporate sponsor that wants to sponsor you?
That sounds like a great scenario to be in.
What a great problem to have.
But I
have too much money.
Yeah. But I think what you're really asking is that, so most films that are financed typically don't come from one source of equity. And so most campaigns are only a portion of the budget. So that's between you and whatever your financier, whether it be a corporate sponsor or just a traditional financier with private equity. You know, that's, you know, it's a conversation you have to have in terms of the agreements between you and that equity financier. You know, how much ownership you have, how much voice do they have. I assume that I don't know the, you know, the full budget of the laser team. Was it entirely crowdfunded, or was there additional budgeting?
Well, we're not done yet, so
Yeah.
we'll see. But there's, you know, Rooster is a profitable production company, so
Yeah.
we're funding it ourselves as well.
Yeah, yeah.
In addition, we're just trying to make the best possible movie that we can.
But yeah, I think you know, like with Freddie Wong, I think Dodge came in and
Yeah.
was a sponsor for Video Game High School, and I mean, I'm pretty sure that, you know, aside from putting a Dodge car in the series, Freddie had sort of free reign.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that can be a multiplier effect that happens, that once a campaign is successful, then it's a lot easier for people to make those risks, you know, because then you have the essentially whatever the economic burden of delivering all the rewards, and then, you know, financing on top of that. It can be definitely a win-win.
One last question?
I'll just speak out loud. For John, do you think that crowdfunding pre-sales can hurt your ability to get distribution?
I can't say never, but I really don't. I think that's a dangerous way of thinking. It's sort of like when you do a film and you do word of mouth screenings. You know, most people don't say, "Oh, word of mouth screenings, that's a terrible idea." You know, what you're doing is going to your core audience and showing them something. You know, most of the films we work on rely on word of mouth. They do not rely on $30 million P&A budgets. And to get word of mouth, you've got to get a certain critical mass of people in to see it. You know, with Life Itself, we did our streaming, and then we went and sold the film to Magnolia, and it never came up as an issue.
And CNN.
Yeah, well, CNN was actually involved with it before, but and it never came up as an issue. And I really, the short answer is, unless you have something with such a minuscule audience that can't cross over beyond its core, I would say no, that's not true.
Do you ever, John, worry about pirating, of like sending out DVDs as a reward for anything, you know, in a crowdfunding platform, and then have that kind of go up?
I mean, you've got to worry about it. I look at it as the same as Ultra VOD. You know, Ultra VOD, where something's on VOD 8 weeks before it's theatrically released. Mm-hmm. That's sort of the same thing we did, except that was open to anyone. This was closed circuit to the people who at least are loyal to us. So, I mean, you have to always worry about piracy, I think, and presumably, and I'm not an expert on that kind of tech stuff, but I don't think that's a reason not to do it either. Otherwise, Magnolia wouldn't do Ultra VOD, and the other distributors wouldn't do it.
I remember when Blair Witch came out, there wasn't a single person I went to that movie with that hadn't already seen it, a pirated version of that movie, but they all still came and saw it in theaters. So I think that's a risk for anything at all, anything.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us at THR Talks.
Thanks.